You're on record.
We're on record, all right. The meeting of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills Planning Board for Monday, November 13th, 2023 at 7:30 PM. Announcement is made that adequate notice of this meeting has been given and that it is being conducted in accordance with NJSA 10:4-6 at second, the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act. Nora, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Didich.
Here.
Councilman DePiero.
Here.
Mr. Mealy.
Here.
Mr. Neff.
Present.
Mr. Napolitano.
Here.
Mr. Shaw.
Here.
Mr. Stanziel.
Here.
And Dinsmore.
Here.
We have our board planner, Mr. Lagana, our board engineer, Mr. Casciano, and our board planner, Ms. Winter, our board attorney, Mr. Lagana.
There you go. Changing jobs here. All right, if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, this meeting is open to the general public. Is there somebody here that wishes to speak to this board on something that is not on our agenda tonight? Hearing and seeing none, we move to the resolutions. You all have a set of resolutions that were not sent to you by the internet that we received this evening. And we've got 7 Campus Drive area in need of redevelopment, 6 Sylvan Master Plan Consistency Review, and then an application on East Halsey Road for a soil moving permit. Are there any questions on these? These are fairly straightforward and we dealt with them last week. Do I have somebody willing to make motions approving these?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Didich?
are we making one motion for all, or?
Would it be reasonable to make one motion for all?
No, I think I would do it.
No, we need to do them individually.
Okay, motion to approve application for 7 Campus Drive, Block 202, Lot 3.8, area in need of redevelopment.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Nora, would you call the roll, please?
Didich.
Yes.
DePiero.
Yes.
Mealy.
Yes.
Neff.
Yes.
Napolitano.
Abstain.
Shaw.
Yes.
Dinsmore.
Good job.
Yes. All right. Do I have somebody willing to move 6 Sylvan?
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve 6 Sylvan Way, Block 202, Lot 1.9, Master Plan Consistency Review.
Thank you, Mr. Mealy. We have a second.
Second.
All right, we have a second. Nora, would you call the roll, please?
Didich.
Yes.
DePiero.
Yes.
Mealy.
Yes.
Neff.
Yes.
Napolitano.
Yes.
Shaw.
Yes.
Stanziel.
Yes.
Dinsmore.
Yes. All right, do I have somebody willing to make the motion for application 23-528? Soil moving permit.
I'll offer it since no one else is speaking up.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Napolitano. Nora, would you call the roll, please?
Didich.
Yes.
DePiero.
Yes.
Mealy.
Yes.
Neff.
Yes.
Napolitano.
Yes.
Shaw.
Yes.
Stanziel.
Yes.
Dinsmore.
Yes. All righty then. So that moves us to the one item on our agenda, which is application number 23:519, WH Holdings, 5 Wood Hollow Block Road, Block 736, Lot 4, for preliminary and final major site plan to construct 2 warehouses.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Jason Tubell from the law firm of Prime and Tubell, attorney for the applicant. This is an application for a preliminary and final major site plan approval for Block 736, Lot 4, otherwise known as 5 Wood Hollow Drive. Its current use is a large office building with associated parking and improvements. Like most office buildings in the state, the applicant is an ownership is struggling to keep its tenants and to keep the occupancy full here. It's a 23-acre parcel that is currently at a 60% lot coverage. The goal here is to develop the property with a conforming use two warehouse buildings, each of approximately 155,243 square feet, with upgrades relating to landscaping, lighting, and utilities. Just some notes that, for the board to keep in mind while the application is proceeding and we're presenting testimony. There's going to be a substantial decrease in impervious coverage as a result of this application, about 40,000 square feet, which is almost an acre, as a result of the proposed development. The application also complies with all setbacks, building heights, coverages, parking. And I'll take something from John McDonough, as he always says. It complies with basically all the higher tiers of zoning in connection with this application. There's also going to be aesthetic improvements as well as stormwater management. We've had a chance to review all the outside agency reports that we've received from your board engineer, your board planner, and we believe we can comply with all items. There's only one that we want to discuss in connection with the bus stop. But other than that, we feel like we can address all the comments set forth therein. There's three bulk variances associated with this project, and I'll go through them briefly. One is for signage. The ordinance allows one wall sign. We have two buildings. We're proposing four wall signs, two on each one. We'll go through that in testimony. And as the board will see, and the board probably knows from knowing this property is bermed up with a lot of vegetation along the perimeter. And we plan on keeping all of that in connection with the proposal. So that's why the signage is important. We also have a variance for the height of a retaining wall, which our engineer will go through, as well as parking in the front yard. And as the board knows, this building, or this property rather, fronts on three streets, which makes it somewhat difficult to park not in the front yard. But that condition exists on the site today, and we're going to be improving that over what's out there in its current form. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I have four witnesses that I plan on calling this evening. I don't plan on any of them being particularly lengthy, but we do have four witnesses. I have our site engineer, Zachary Chaplin from Stonefield Engineering and Design. I have our project architect, Charles Dietz. I have our traffic engineer, John Korak, and then finally our professional planner, John McDonough. Those will be the four witnesses that we plan on calling. I provided my affidavit of service and publication to the board. So unless there's any questions from me, I'd be happy to call our first witness.
Well, we're going to do a completeness review first with some waivers.
Yep. Just two waivers. So first is for the temporary contractors, construction structures or storage areas and where those may be located. And the second is for not submitting separate sheets for final and preliminary site plans. And we don't have any objection to those.
All right. Shall we move to allow the waivers as presented in the planner's report of, what date is that, 7/21 or 9/27/23?
9/27.
Yep, 9/27. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman, a motion to approve as described herewith.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So our first witness I'd like to call is Zachary Chaplin with Stonefield Engineering Design. We'll be qualifying Mr. Chaplin as an expert in the field of civil engineering. That's fine. Let's swear you in.
Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Name and address for the
That's
record,
not
please.
on.
Sure. My name is Zachary Chaplin, last name Chaplin. I'm with the firm Stonefield Engineering and Design. Office located at 92 Park Avenue in Rutherford, New Jersey.
Okay. Zach, you just go through your qualifications for the board, educational background, licenses held, whether it's current and good standing, and experience being testifying before similar boards.
Sure. So I received my bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Delaware. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the states of New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. And I've testified in front of numerous boards throughout the state, including other boards in Morris County.
I'd ask if the board would accept Mr. Chaplin as an expert in the field of civil engineering.
Are there any questions on Mr. Chaplin's background? Hearing and seeing none. Counselor?
Thank you very much. All right, so Zach, why don't you do a brief overview of the existing conditions at the site before we go into the proposed?
Sure. Before I jump in, I think just to kind of piggyback off what you said, I think this is really an opportunity to redevelop the site with a warehouse facility, and I think some of the positives coming out of this are that reduction of impervious surfaces. One of the main highlights, too, is just really trying to preserve all of that green space that's there around the perimeter, those berms and plantings that have put in already. And then, you know, as well as just the design of the site, which I'll get into, kind of how we laid out the buildings and the parking area. But with that said, I'd like to just speak to an exhibit that I can mark.
All right, so we'll mark this as A1. A1. All right, so Zach, if you could just identify the exhibit and indicate who prepared it.
Sure. So this exhibit is labeled Aerial Exhibit Overall. It's prepared by Stonefield Engineering and Design, dated November 10, 2023.
Okay.
And really, this is just Google Earth imagery of the site, just to kind of give you an idea of where the site's located and its surroundings. So as Jason mentioned, this is a 23-acre site that sits just east of Interstate 80 and 287. It's currently developed with that office building complex. There are 3 streets that it fronts on, which is quite unique for a property. So Wood Hollow Road is to the west, Smith Road is to the north, and Jefferson Road is to the east. And then to the south is another similar industrial style use and building directly abutting us. Kind of just taking a further step out, just in terms of the uses in the area, you can see there's really no residential uses close by. There's a couple hotels that are to the east, there's office buildings to the north, and then you know, some more office space in the general area. So I think predominantly just where we are, I think is, you know, a site that makes sense for this type of use, which is probably why it's permitted. And of course, we're abutting a very, very similar type use. I do want to quickly just mark a second exhibit.
We'll mark that A2, and if you could just do the same thing, identify it for the record. Prepared by Stonefield Engineering and Design.
Yeah, so this is aerial exhibit prepared by Stonefield Engineering and Design, dated November 10, 2023. This is just more of a zoomed-in version of the site. So essentially, you can see that it's pretty well developed. It's a lot of parking area, a lot of, you know, probably mostly not very used parking area. The main entrance is off Wood Hollow Road, and then there's also curb cuts on Jefferson Road as well as Smith Road. And what I mentioned before, which I think is important to note on this plan, is kind of the perimeter landscaping and the berms, as well as a stormwater basin at the southeast corner. And all of these things we're looking to preserve as part of our application. I'm going to jump into our site plan.
Okay. So A3. And Zach, that's just a colorized version of the plan submitted to the board with the landscaping superimposed?
Correct. I can still mark it if that's what...
Yep, we'll mark it A3. Also prepared by Stonefield, correct?
Correct. Also prepared by Stonefield Engineering, dated November 3rd, 2023.
What was the date on A2? Was there a date on A2? Sorry, I didn't catch it.
November 10.
Thank you.
So under proposed conditions,
If you're hitting the little thing on the side, you're muting it. The little level. Take the other one.
this work?
No, not yet.
It's working.
This work?
Come here. That sounds like it. Okay.
All right. So, under proposed conditions, we're proposing 2 warehouses. Each one is approximately 155,000 square feet. Each warehouse building does contain office space, approximately 5,600 square feet. One of the things when you look at the layout of the site that we looked to do was propose 2 buildings, and then all of the loading activity is actually in the center of the site. So the buildings actually really screen that loading activity to the center of the site, so you really can't see it from around the perimeter. On the north and the south side, that's where you have your regular parking area for that office space on both ends. And what you'll note is while we do have parking in the front yard, it's a substantial reduction compared to the parking we just looked at in the existing condition. So we're actually making an improvement, even though there is parking in the front yard, It's well behind the setback, it's behind the existing storm basin, and it's much less than that's out there today. In terms of the access, we're pretty much keeping the access points as they are today. There's one curb cut on each street. The curb cut on Wood Hollow, that's going to be predominantly where the trucks are going to access from. So that curb cut's been oversized to 60 feet. And the reason for that, I know this was one of the questions in one of the letters, is that if trucks are staging to make a turn, the 60 feet allows trucks to turn in and not conflict with a truck trying to exit while another truck is entering. So what we have here is really trucks entering and exiting only off Wood Hollow, which my counterpart, John Korak, will speak to the traffic, is kind of closer to the main highways. So we're really limiting the trucks from just off Wood Hollow Road. We do have access points on Jefferson and Smith Road for the office employees, as well as just fire access. So that road all around the property, that's mainly there for just fire access. And we do agree to widen that easterly road, I think that was a comment in the fire letter, to 26 feet, which we agree we can do.
And Zach, just going back to the layout of the buildings, they fully comply with the ordinance's setback requirements, correct?
Correct. So the buildings comply with all setbacks.
Okay.
Now, in terms of just pedestrian access, there are no sidewalks today along any of the frontages. I think this is a type of use that will predominantly be utilized by people driving here. I do want to note that there was, a question of whether we could provide access to an existing bus stop on Jefferson Road. We took a look at it. It's a little bit challenging because of the berm at the southwest corner. There's a lot of heavy vegetation and steep slopes there that go as high as 10, 12 feet. So I think that would be challenging to do, and it's the only, I think, item in the letter that we're not agreeing to comply with, just because of the challenge, I think, to provide that access point. So I just want to note that for the record. In terms of parking, we have 76 parking spaces proposed, 8 of which will be EV spaces. There are 90 loading docks, so 45 loading docks per each building, as well as 4 drive-in doors, so 2 drive-in doors for each building.
And Zach, do you have the required number of ADA parking stalls?
Believe it is 4 ADA parking spaces, but then also a portion of the EV spaces need to be ADA compliant as well.
All right, and we comply with that, correct?
Correct. However, we are going to relocate the EV spaces, so to not double dip on that. That was a comment in one of the letters, which we can agree to do.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned, the loading is in the center of the site. It's really going to be dictated by the tenant that moves in, just in terms of, the type of loading and just the operations. I think one of the things that we don't know yet is, who the tenant will be, but I think ultimately we'll comply with all local, state requirements, just in terms of hours of operation, deliveries, et cetera. But ultimately, that's something that'll be determined by the tenant. We do expect the largest delivery vehicle to be a WB67, and the site has been designed to accommodate that. In terms of trash, it's another component that will be dictated by the tenant. We are showing 2 trash enclosures at the easterly end of the property. However, it's possible that tenants may have a compactor that they put in, instead of a loading space, they'll put a compactor there or an additional trash enclosure. Again, that'll be tenant specific. Getting into landscaping, so we talked about preserving a lot of this existing vegetation, and I think this rendering kind of does a good job of just showing those trees and areas to remain. It doesn't do justice the slopes that we have. If you know the site well and you drive around it, you can tell if you're on the east side by the basin how much lower you are, and you can tell if you're kind of driving around Wood Hollow or Smith, that berm that slopes up that makes it kind of hard to see into the site. So all of that, for the most part, is remaining. Our goal in terms of the landscaping was to enhance what's there. We're proposing native species, believe it's over 150 trees that essentially would, be around mostly the perimeter of the site to enhance what's there. Fencing is only going to be proposed around the basin areas. That'll be 4-foot high fencing. I think a previous iteration of plans may have shown fencing elsewhere, but we have removed that. We do propose a retaining wall that is on average about 7 feet high, in the front yard where I believe the requirement is 4 feet. The main reason for this is at the west side of the site, that's where one of those large berms are. In order to preserve that berm, we are putting the wall in so that we can save those trees and save those berms. We're going to be on the low side. The building is going to sit lower, so you won't actually even see the wall from Wood Hollow Road. You're just going to see those trees and that berm that's there today, and the wall helps us kind of stabilize the site for drainage purposes, keep the slopes not too steep, and again, just it won't be very visible from the roadway. In terms of drainage, we are a major development. There is over an acre of disturbance, but as Jason said, we're reducing impervious by approximately 40,000 square feet. So that's over an acre of impervious areas, predominantly vehicular use areas that we're removing. So that's going to naturally enhance water quality. It's going to naturally reduce peak flow rates. It's going to naturally reduce stormwater volumes. For the most part, most of the site drains to the existing retention basin at the eastern corner of the property, and that basin is going to be maintained. In addition to that, we are also proposing a bioretention area in the northern corner of the property to enhance and help with water quality for the new vehicular surface that we're putting in. So essentially, we're reducing impervious, which is making the stormwater conditions better today, and we're enhancing it with an additional bioretention basin. And sorry, just going back to the landscaping, there's 82 deciduous trees, 25 flowering trees, and 163 evergreen trees. So the idea there was to kind of not just put in typical buffering evergreens, but have a mix of deciduous trees, flowering trees, the evergreens, that will really blend in well with what's out there today.
Can you give me those numbers again? Sure.
82 deciduous trees, 25 flowering trees, 163 evergreen trees.
Thank you.
Jumping into lighting, I think for this use, it's generally a modest lighting plan. There aren't too many light poles. If you look at the lighting plan, we're mostly relying on wall-mounted fixtures that are on the building to light the site. Everything will be LED, downlit lighting, shielded, and there's minimal spillage across the property. And again, there's a lot of buffer around the perimeter, which really helps to kind of keep the lighting self-contained into the site. In terms of utilities, we're going to have new connections to the road. Our connections are going to be tying into the mains off Jefferson Road. I think one of the challenges of this project is that there is a stormwater and sanitary sewer easement that traverses the center of the property. So this is something that we work closely with the DPW on early on in talking about just relocating those easements. So one of the letters that came in was from that department with some comments about the relocations, which we agreed to address those comments in that letter. But for the most part, those easements kind of cross through the center of the property, right a little west of where the existing building is today. We're going to relocate those so that it does not interfere with the warehouse buildings. In addition, we agree with the comments from the fire department to add in the requested hydrants. We do have a loop proposed as well, so that'll be a condition we agree to. Lastly, there is a monument sign proposed that's on Wood Hollow Road and I believe was included in our latest submission. So I know there was a question in one of the letters about where that was, but we do have a monument sign proposed. As Jason mentioned, we agreed to all the comments and all the review letters we've received, with the exception of the access to the bus stop. I think in summary, when you look at this project, some of the things to consider is, this is a permitted use where we really meet almost all of the requirements. We designed it in such a way to really screen the main activity area in the center. We're enhancing the landscaping, reducing impervious coverage, and designed a safe and efficient layout for this type of use. So unless I missed anything.
Yeah, I asked you about ADA parking, but just the site in general is ADA compliant with respect to grades, sidewalks, pedestrian activity?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And then outside agency approvals, if there's any, if you can just inform the board.
Sure. So we've made submissions to the Soil Conservation District and the county, and we'll also need a TWA for the sewer main relocation. TWA will occur, assuming this gets approved here, and then, like I said, the Conservation District and county applications are underway.
Okay. And in terms of the variances relating to the site, which I guess really for you are the wall and the parking in the front yard, you don't see any negative impacts from a civil engineering perspective?
No, I do not. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have for Mr. Chaplin.
Any members of the board have questions of this witness on this testimony? Mr. Meth, I figured you might put your hand up.
I have a few. Anybody else want to go first? Just
Mr. Shaw.
My question was mainly, this building individual, are you dividing into several warehouses, or is for individual one customer?
Yeah, we don't know yet, but right now, it's just shown as one tenant to be in there
Yeah, because you have 45 loading docks,
per, yes.
which comes out approximately 3,000 square feet per loading dock. So are you dividing, that's what I was wondering, if you're dividing into several tenants, or?
A lot of tenants may utilize more than one loading dock, so it wouldn't probably be split up that way, but it's going to be dependent on the tenant, and also, the loading docks may not be used. Like I said, they might just use that area for trash compactor, trash enclosure. It's there right now because it's something that's popular, that's needed, but until a tenant is chosen, we don't know.
I understand, but basically, you're planning to divide into several tenants to one building? That's what I was asking.
It could be several tenants. I doubt it would be more than 2 or 3, but we're showing it right now as one.
Thank you.
Other members before Mr. Meth gets going? No? Hearing and seeing none, the floor is yours, Mr. Meth. Oh,
so, as I understand your testimony, I didn't see in the site plan set any truck turning templates. Your testimony is that all trucks are going to enter off Wood Hollow, and I guess they're going to go into loading docks and then go back out through Wood Hollow? They're not going to use the rear?
Yeah, I can actually, I have
Or
it with,
I guess the south?
I have it with me if you want me to introduce
Yeah,
it.
sure, that's fine. So we're up to A4. Actually, quick question. Would you rather, or, Zach, do you want traffic to go over that, or or do you want to do it?
I can do this one.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm just, what are you up to?
A4.
Truck turning template?
Yep.
Is there a date on that?
Yeah, it's titled Truck Turn Exhibit, prepared by Stonefield Engineering and Design, dated November 10, 2023. So it's multiple sheets, but essentially what it shows is we have,
Sorry, how many sheets? 6? I'm just going to collectively mark them as A4.
That's fine,
6
consisting of
sheets.
6 sheets, that's
Yep.
fine.
so that drive aisle is 70 feet. So
I
there's-
understand that, yeah.
So there's space to back into the spot, and I don't know if you have trouble seeing this, but what this first page shows is the trucks entering in on Wood Hollow and then backing up into the most westerly space.
Okay.
So, that would be like one of the more challenging spaces. And then what this shows is coming in and the other side backing into it.
Just identify, so you're now on the 3rd sheet of the set?
So, yeah, I'm on the 3rd sheet of the set. This goes to the other side, again, just showing how they get in.
So trucks can get out through, make that turn to get out through the, I guess the Jefferson Road side aisle?
No, the intention is to not use Jefferson Road. That would be for fire access only. And again, I'm just trying to get to, I believe it's on the 5th sheet.
and perhaps individual cars coming in to park at the,
Yeah, so they would be able to just back into the drive aisle and then leave, as you're seeing here, back onto Wood Hollow. It's a 60-foot wide, oversized driveway, so a truck can be stationed here while a truck is making a turn in and not have any conflict. So we're trying to keep all the truck traffic to just this driveway.
Okay,
And it's-
so half the trucks coming in here are going to have to do blindside backing, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. And I noticed the 2 trash enclosures down at the bottom are by Jefferson. How is the trash going to access those?
So the trash can come in off, it's not just going to be restricted to Wood Hollow. It's obviously a much smaller truck. We would envision them coming off Wood Hollow anyway and just being able to turn right into the enclosure, pick it up, and then it could circulate back around to Smith Road. It could They could make a maneuver down here in the oversized drive aisle to leave, but there's a number of ways for the trash enclosure to get in and out.
Is it front loading or rear loading?
Front loading.
So the front loading, okay. Next question. What's the slope on the Smith Road driveway?
Just gonna grab the plans for this. Actually. I believe it's approximately 5%.
Okay. And I guess the Jefferson Road is less steep, correct?
Correct.
All right. Can you show me where these bus stops are on the plan?
You have to go to the aerial, right?
It's actually,
Is it on it?
it's pretty much right at this corner,
Okay.
like in line with the property line on Jefferson.
Okay. So as I understand, and I understand there's somebody testifying on traffic, there's projected to be 124 employees on the site, right?
Correct.
Yep,
And 76 parking spaces, right?
correct.
So there's about, well, and some of those spaces are ADA, and some of them are electric vehicle parking. And I understand in the statutes and our ordinances, no other vehicles can park in electric vehicle parking lots. So there's somewhere around 50 people, if everyone drove, who will not have parking, who will not be accommodated on site, correct?
I'll let our traffic engineer answer that, but I also know that it shifts, so I think typically these are like 8-hour shifts, so sometimes the parking overlaps.
Okay. Well, my main concern is accessibility to the bus stop. There's obviously not enough, there's not enough parking to accommodate everybody driving on site, given those numbers. And so I guess I am concerned about, so if anyone is walking to transit, they're going to have to walk in the drive aisles, correct?
As of right now, correct, yes.
Now, doesn't ADA require that you provide pedestrian accessibility to a public street?
Only if there's a public sidewalk,
And you're certain about that?
yes.
All right. All right, those are all my questions, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. So if the use becomes multi-tenant type use, and let's just say I wanted to take one loading bay myself, right? So it's 3,000 square feet. Are they obligated to take a specific set amount of office space? Or can they just take 3,000 square feet of loading dock?
The office space would be, we have 5,000 square feet of, I think, 5,600 square feet of office space. That would just be, however many tenants would be in the building, that's the amount of office space that we could have, because the parking allocation is based on the office space.
Well, I guess where I'm going with that is, let's just say for all intents and purposes, you had 45 individual tenants.
Oh, okay.
But somebody now is using a loading dock, 3,000 square feet, and there's 3 or 4 people kind of ad hocing some desks in there and doing some other stuff. So now all of a sudden your capacity for parking would get skewed because you're basing your parking off of the 5,600 square feet of.
The parking is based on several factors that are all ordinance driven. So, Zach, you want to go through those?
I mean, I've just been to warehouses where people have like ad hoc desks kind of sitting in there.
Listen, the way that the way that the ordinance is drafted, we would have to comply and stipulate to the number of employees on site. Like, that would have to be a condition in the
Like in the lease, like so.
In the lease, in the approval, 100%, because the way your ordinance reads, I think it's one space for every 2 employees. So the owner-operator has, no matter how many tenants are in the building, let's just take your example, which I think is on the higher end, obviously, it would probably be more like 2 or 3, but they'd be bound by those number of employees regardless.
But would you have like restrictions, like you can't just take this 3,000 square feet and turn it into an office? It's got to be utilized for.
Yeah, I think upon.
I'm just saying because I've seen it.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I guess I don't mind that as a condition in the approval if you want to have extra protection in there. But the bottom line is, you're right, they couldn't just make an ad hoc office next to the loading dock. It would have to be a loading dock, and all we could have was 5,000, whatever the number is, in the building in total. And we're happy to comply with that because that's what we have on the plans.
Okay.
Any other question, Mr.
Jim?
Napolitano?
Okay, would it help when the architect comes up to show how the office is laid out, office space is laid out in comparison to the rest of the warehouse?
Yeah, that's fine too.
I think perhaps
yeah,
that might be a good illustration.
Yeah, but
of-
I think the point was, we couldn't expand that office space
Right,
or
right.
change it around, which we're totally okay with.
Understood.
All right, thank you. I have a lot of paperwork here. Thank you for letting me know. This photo here, do you have what it might look like with that superimposed? Do you have an exhibit like that?
I mean, we have this,
I know, but like from this view away, did you guys have one that superimposed those two warehouses on this project site?
I don't have that with me now.
I don't want to keep looking for it, but, could you just briefly talk about what is the bioretention, small scale bioretention, what is that?
Sure, so that's an NJDEP terminology, just basically essentially the tributary drainage area to it. That's why it's called a small scale basin. But it's essentially this oval area here on the north side of the property, pretty narrow. And really the reason for that is to treat a lot of the vehicular surface from the site, naturally green infrastructure, treat that stormwater.
Does it tie into the stormwater retention plan you have now?
It does.
It does, okay. So it kind of like filter it out, or take some of the water away from it. Okay, thank you for that. And then if I'm accurate, you're gonna have more green space on your site than there is now. Is that accurate?
Correct.
We don't hear that very often, so thanks for that. And I was thinking about the pedestrians also walking, but I guess that's gonna be addressed.
All right, other members of the board have?
I have one other question.
Mr. Stanzio?
So let's just say that each warehouse, winds up having 6 tenants. Where are all the people accessing the building to get to the subdivided spaces?
I'll think that's a better question for our architect.
Okay.
Mr. Canjiano, do you have,
Yeah, I have a few follow-up on your testimony and then in regard to my letter. First, just a simple one. I didn't hear the testimony about the chain link fence. It seems to be a 6-foot fence going around the perimeter. What was your testimony? I missed that.
We removed it. We're just doing fencing around the basins, and it's going to be 4 feet high.
Okay, thank you. And then,
That's an elimination of a variance, correct?
yes.
Right. It is for the fence, but
They still have the wall, which
Yeah,
I
the
believe you said is 7 feet.
The retaining wall variance is still there, correct?
The
It goes
retaining
up
wall
to
variance,
8.
but there was, in your report, I believe, was a call.
I think it eliminated a variance like a few letters back, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, it eliminates it for the actual chain link fence. 4 foot is permitted.
Yeah.
okay.
So then, next is about the 60-foot wide driveway. That is actually a variance, and the code is very restrictive, and you'd need a variance regardless, because it does require the driveway throat, the maximum width is 24 feet. Now, that's not practical for this, but 60 feet even seems, and I think there's an existing double driveway there. I find it hard that you really need 60 feet for the 2 truck movements, or even possibly some kind of planted treatment in the middle there after you get through your turning movements. It's awfully very, very wide through for a pretty long distance.
I can share this with you if you want to take a closer look, but I mean, we might have some room to go down 5 feet or so, a little bit, pinch it in. It's just one of those things where, especially for this type of use, where we wouldn't want like a truck staging for a truck not to be able to come in because it's too narrow.
That's something I think, if you felt it could be reduced slightly, we could work with your office.
Well, I'm talking more down as you get away from the throat, almost like a divider planter toward, as you get closer to the building.
Well, there's not much room. It's like basically the length of a truck. You mind if I?
Yeah, they weren't submitted, so it's the first time I've seen.
Yeah. So, as you can see, it's kind of like the length of a truck. So once they're in, they're already at the 4-way intersection.
Okay. You probably have a few feet, maybe 5 or 10 feet in total. You can probably reduce it down to 50 feet, if I had to guess. But I'll just add a condition to have it reviewed with my office, just to see if we can tweak that driveway width down a little bit, if that's okay with the board.
It's fine with the applicant.
I'm missing why that's important, to reduce it by 5 feet.
It's 60 feet is, to my opinion, I don't know that I've ever seen a driveway at 60 feet. It's really, really wide. I'm just trying to close that throat a little bit so that they provide their access, but yet not have this sea of pavement.
Could they put like a little island in the middle? 5-foot wide aisle?
That was kind of my question too. I was just looking to close it up a little bit or some kind of planter in the middle.
A little,
But it's not a huge point, but I just thought that it seemed a little bit wider.
Whatever the board, but we're happy to work with you on this.
does that work? A little island in the center of that 60 feet?
The trucks are gonna probably drive over that, so we wouldn't recommend
Yeah.
the island, but
Okay.
we could taper it down
All
a
right.
little bit.
And then, building heights, want to make sure that if this board approved this, that did you run your calculations on building height? It just seemed from the architectural drawings, they're at 45 feet from finished floor, and I saw another exhibit 43 feet from finished floor, and then your parking, your perimeter in the rear where the loading docks are 4 feet below finished floor. So can you give some testimony on your perimeter grade and your ability to meet the 45-foot maximum building height?
I'm gonna let our architect speak to that, and I'll speak to him as well, but I think the height is, I think it's well less than 45 feet, so there's a significant amount of
Just looking
buffer.
at the architectural
Yeah.
elevations and call that. So my only point would be that if you're not asking for relief, it's, at the end of the day,
Yeah, we understand, it has to be 45
it
feet.
has to be 45.
Understood.
And then there was and this is really in the traffic report, but there was discussion about 70 land bank parking spaces. There's no,
No, I think that was just an
Okay.
error in the report.
and then loading, water. There was no response from the water department. I'm asking in the letter, and will you agree to contact the water department and see if they have any input on requirements for looping, since you're connecting to, you're between Wood Hollow and Jefferson. Would you agree to consult with the water department on
Yes.
any of their requirements? I see that they didn't respond. And I think that was generally it. I am still interested in the parking count. It just seems like a lower parking count than what would be customary, particularly since you don't have a named user yet. You don't know who's going to be using it. So I just wanted to make sure you guys have enough parking for a potential tenant. I don't know if that's a question for the traffic engineer.
Yeah, we'll have both our traffic engineer and our planner address that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions by
One
Mr.
more, sorry.
Napolitano?
Have you guys done it before, somewhere else? Have you done this split warehouse one somewhere else, on different
Like
properties?
this applicant, or
Just this design before?
like two warehouses next to each
Yeah.
other? I mean, I've seen it before. I personally haven't done the two next to each other like this. Actually, take that back, I have. We're working on one of the construction right now in Cranford.
All right, are these similar concerns that those boards had?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Christine?
Right.
do you have-
So I guess we'll clarify on the fence. There's a detail in the construction details that's showing a 6-foot high fence for the chain link. If you're proposing 4, that would have to be updated. And I believe Mr. Canjiano already went over the loading berth size and the variance needed for that.
I did not.
You did mention it. So with I believe the truck size you said was a WB67, the loading berth needs to be twice the length of your longest truck. With a 60-foot loading space, obviously that's not going to quite cut it. So you will need a variance for that.
Understood.
That was it for me.
Mr. Canjiano, did you want to follow up?
No, we asked that you provide testimony in support of your variance for the
Right.
loading size. But that's-
Yeah, I think this is a very customary type layout for warehouse use in terms of the 60-foot space and 70-foot drive aisle, and I think that code requirement is probably more specific to like retail type uses where there's more maneuverability or, type of layout where you want that extra space, where this is very customary, type design that we're proposing, and sufficient.
Just how long is the wheelbase 67 truck?
The wheelbase of the 67.
You had a chart with it on a
Yeah.
plan, whatever that exhibit A4 had.
So the trailer is 53 and then 28 feet.
Okay. So you had a calculator or something? Could you tell us what that is?
I
Is that
can do-
81 feet?
Yeah.
So you have a 60-foot loading dock and a 70-foot aisle and an 81-foot vehicle.
So not every truck is going to be of this size. Most trucks will probably be the WB50s, or even box trucks to some extent. This could be a truck that could utilize these loading docks, and there is sufficient maneuverability and space for it. This would be the largest one.
Okay. It's been a very long time since I've seen a trailer that wasn't 53 feet on a tractor trailer. I think most of the trucks are likely to be the size of, the only thing that's probably going to vary is the length of the cab, because I think the wheelbase 67 has a sleeper cab in it. And if you have a tractor that doesn't have a sleeper cabinet, it's about a wheelbase 63 truck, I believe.
Zach, you want John to go?
Yeah,
go through that?
I'll let John's a little bit more familiar with the specific truck question, so I'll let him
Okay.
speak to it. But I don't think it's not 81. It's
You said 28 plus
it's
53, right?
It's 23 and a half plus the 53.
Yeah,
I misread that.
And I guess, Gordon, what the testimony was, there might be WB40s, WB50s, and 67s that traverse the site, but the 67 was the largest vehicle that it was size. But that they all would not be the exact same size if they came to the property.
This is very common for this type of use. The 130 feet is an industry standard to have your 60 feet and your 70 feet for this type of use.
What if two of them came in though, and one was on the left warehouse, the other one was on the right warehouse, close to each other? You'd probably be blocking that middle roadway. Just saying, if you had two that were 76 and a half feet long on either side, butted up to a dock, that roadway now becomes non-existent,
Which roadway?
the middle one.
The aisleway in the middle.
Well, I think in that case, they would have to make some extra maneuvers in that rare case, but we don't design for those specific instances, which, are unusual.
All right, any other members of the board have questions of this witness on this testimony? Are there any members of the public who have questions of this witness on this testimony? Hearing and seeing none. Counselor, you want?
Our next witness is our architect, Charles Dietz. We'll swear him in.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Name and address for the record, please.
Charles P. Dietz, D-I-E-T-Z, Managing Member of the Dietz Partnership LLC, Architects.
All right. Chuck, if you can go through your qualifications for the board as a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey.
I have a Bachelor's of Architecture degree from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, New Jersey School of Architecture. I'm a licensed professional architect in the state of New Jersey for the past 35 years. I also hold 14 other licenses in other states up and down the East Coast. I've testified before this board and probably 200 boards in my 35-year career, so hopefully I'm qualified.
Would the board accept Mr. Dietz as an expert in the field of architecture?
Any questions on hearing and seeing none?
And I'm
Counselor?
working on 10 warehouses similar to this around the state.
Okay. All right. So Chuck, why don't you start with the elevations that you put up with the rendering? So we'll mark that as A5.
Yes. Hopefully, this exhibit, which you haven't seen before, will be 90%, if not all of my testimony, because it kind of shows everything we're trying to provide the applicant and the municipality for doing these types of buildings in this location. My office actually is on East Halsey Road, so we're just around the corner. So we're very familiar with the site. A5? A5?
Yep, sorry.
And what this is a pair of 3D color rendering perspectives. The top view is taken from Smith and Jefferson. As Mr. Tuvell and Mr. Chaplin mentioned, the highlight from this intersection is obviously the berm and the existing detention area that exists today that we're going to maintain, the trees that currently exist around the perimeter of the buildings. And you can see how they start to shield. You can see even with the height of the buildings, as they sit up on the berm, what the view would be like if you were at that intersection at Smith and Jefferson. We are proposing a concrete panel, modern warehouse building. When I say concrete panel, it could be precast or it could be tilt wall. And I think the beautiful feature in a precast style building is it's maintenance free, it's durable, it's long lasting. And the challenge for architects like myself that design these types of buildings is how do we break up a very long rectangular box and make them look pretty and make them look nice for the municipalities. And what we like to do is we do that with a couple ways. The scoring, whether it's tilt wall or precast, you'll see, if you really looked at my black and white drawings, you'll see all the vertical joints. Those would be the individual panels. And then we like to add both horizontal and other vertical scoring to accentuate the different features along the facades. Secondly, it's color. How can we paint the buildings in a nice neutral earth tone series of colors to accentuate and delineate the facade treatments along this building? And lastly, both at the main entrance and as I've designed this building, and to answer Mr. Stanzel's question, this is not designed as a flex warehouse building where you might have 20, 30 small 3,000 square foot users in a building like this. This is meant to be a maximum of 2 to 3 tenants, and that's how I've designed the facades. We've taken both the left and right corners of both buildings and accentuated those features with architectural elements. We've actually lowered the roof area where the office entrance or the entrance to the main portion of the building on both corners. We've indented them from the main rectangles, so we've kind of created a box within a box to actually create an architectural aesthetic. We have more glass both at the ground level and second level above the decorative canopy that would protect the patrons coming in from rain and inclement weather. And at the intersection of where that box within the warehouse box is, we've projected a decorative wall, and in this case, we're proposing a nice neutral blue to be painted there along with the grays and the whites on the rest of the facades. One of the other treatments we like to do is to bring natural light into the warehouse area. So in the old days, everybody remembers from the turn of the century, everybody put skylights on the roof. Bad leaks, can't control it, tough to do. So the modern version is we now install vertical inset insulated window systems, at least 1 to 2 in every architectural or structural bay within that zone that's up high enough but below the structure that lets the natural light as the sun traverses around these buildings and brings light back into the warehouse areas. So I think we've done a pretty good job at creating not just a shoebox and drop it on this site. The accentuations of the 3 different roof heights, the main parapet on this building is 43 feet, which is basically this elevation. Just the bump up on either side of the box within a box was bumped up to 45 feet, which meets your ordinance. And then, like I mentioned, the actual entrance box area has actually been dropped down to 36 feet. Now, because I said this was designed as a modern warehouse building, modern warehouses today start at a minimum of 36-foot clear height inside for the tenants to rack to. That's kind of the standard right now. Some warehouses are even going 40. We've designed this as 36 clear, which means that's for the bottom of our structure, sprinklers, so on. So what we have to do is take into account the structural roof members and girders that are going to support this roof, their depth and their size, the pitch of the roof, because it's a flat roof, but we have to get the water off this roof. So we do have to pitch it either in one direction or put a ridge in the middle and pitch it to both sides. We will pitch to the direction that Mr. Chaplin has set up for the drainage system. So all the stormwater will come off these buildings, drain down, come out, and tie into the existing storm system or his new biosystem, and then into the existing system. So that's kind of how we work inside out when we determine how high we like to make these buildings. You start with what do you want as a clear height, and for buildings of 155,000 square feet broken into 2, maybe 3 tenants each, those size tenants are going to want that 36-foot clear. So that's how we arrived at our height calculations for the building. And again, like I said, if you look at my submission drawings, the black and whites, we have this architectural box within a box on both sides, because we're not sure if it's one tenant, which side he might want to have his entrance on. The parking across the front is distributed equally across that entire front, so it really doesn't matter which side the tenant chooses. And if in fact the third tenant came in, we certainly have the ability to create doors and windows in the middle of the building. What I haven't shown, and I know, I'm not sure if it was Mr. Stanziel asked, we haven't showed all the breakout doors, but again, with precast or tilt wall, when we do, if in fact this project is approved, we will design in the construction drawings what they call knockout panels, which means we'll set up a series of panels going across the facade, which will be designed to be cut later if more than 1 or more than 2 or more than 3 tenants come in. That'll be easily saw cut out with the reinforcing not being disturbed in the panel, where we can then install storefront doors, so on and so forth. And actually, we haven't even shown on the front, and I apologize, we've shown the back doors to get out. We've not shown the egress doors on the front and the side of the building, because we will meet the maximum code requirements, which is 400 foot of travel distance. And again, that's difficult to do now. I should say it's easy to do now because there's no racking in place. So we usually design that based on a racking plan, and then we'll cut the holes in the panel and put all the proper egress and life safety in the building, because you can't travel more than 400 feet to get to an exit, and we will make sure this is a code-conforming building. The second view that you see below on this sheet, we did secondarily after we discussed as a team. Obviously, the biggest user in the neighborhood is the hotel. Everybody's familiar with the hotel across the street. So what we did is we took the alternate view, which is more from Wood Hollow, looking back into the parking lot of the hotel on Smith, on what they would see. So you can see it's a little different vision, because the detention and the berms do not come all the way around that side of the building. It's roughly flat, but we really wanted to show, as Mr. Chaplin stated, all the existing and proposed trees and shrubbery and landscaping that will be there to help screen these buildings as you look from the hotel. So I think, again, much to my dismay, you see less architecture in these renderings and you see more landscaping, but I think they're as true as we could get them based on Google Images and Mr. Chaplin's plans on what's there today and what we're proposing for both of these views. Again, I think we did a very nice job on breaking these big shoe boxes up. And again, each building is a mirror image of itself. So as Mr. Chaplin stated, both backs of the buildings face each other. So the front elevation that you're seeing here and here is duplicated on the other side. So the rear building that faces back to the other property actually will look like this versus loading docks and trucks. So we have 2 fronts facing the neighborhoods, and then and a warehouse truck court in between. And to answer again, Mr. Napolitano or someone's question, in the 35 years that I've been doing architecture and warehouse buildings, this is actually a design from way back. I mean, you don't see a lot of this now because they're just building 1 million square foot warehouses, and they have sites that are big enough to just put one giant building on it. Back when I started in the 80s, this was more typical, where you were able to get back-to-back warehouses with back-to-back docks, and they were usually hidden like this. So this is something that's coming back, I think, as a mid-size. Again, you might think 155,000 square feet is big, but in the world of distribution and warehousing, this is considered a small to medium-sized warehouse. Of the 10 or 12 projects I have going right now, half of them are 250, 350, and 450,000 square feet. But this type of design has been around. It's proven it's been able to work over the years for this type of distribution and storage facility. Again, you design for maximum flexibility. We have no tenant. So we can offer, and the applicant can offer up to a client, I can give you 45 docks if you're a 155,000 square foot user, a couple drive-ins, stairs and dumpster locations. Again, you might not need them all. If we had a user before we actually constructed the building, we could put knockout panels in and not even construct all 45 docks. I'm doing that on 2 or 3 warehouses down in Monmouth County right now. But that gives you, with this type of construction, this type of use, the flexibility to do more storefront, more doors, more overhead doors down the road after you find out who the tenant is. But I think what we're trying to show you is the maximum that this would ever be: 45 docks, the several load-in doors, the trash compactor, and man doors for egress and for entrance, and the storefronts. My standard testimony would be, again, as a warehouse, we're not proposing this to be a conditioned warehouse. We will provide some units on the roof that will be screened, that will provide heat, obviously to keep the sprinkler system from freezing. This will be a fully sprinklered and protected building, and they will provide ventilation. In the office areas, depending on how many different office areas totaling 5,600 square feet, we can either provide a split system within the building, or we'll supply a small package unit on the roof. Again, so really, we're not talking a lot of mechanical equipment. These large, what they're called, are Cambridge units that sit up there without ductwork. They basically blow down into the space, and they provide a temperature of between 45 and 55, 60 degrees, just to keep the place reasonably tempered, and to have the sprinkler pipes not freeze. And so you don't have the large package units with air conditioning like you would on a retail or an office building like it currently has. And I've known this building that sits there today because, again, my office is around the corner. My office has been in Parsippany. Out of my 35 years, probably 20 of those 35 years, I've had the pleasure of having an office in Parsippany. So I'm very familiar with this. This building looks like the 1970s, black glass and a precast concrete decorative panel with holes in it. So as an architect, that's not something I would, be pleased with. And I think we have a better alternative architecturally, color-wise, breaking up the monotony of the large box, which that does not have. And I think this could only be a positive improvement to the township, knowing these office buildings are basically going dark and being vacant. I'm looking at some other sites in Morris County the same way. And when we started in Parsippany, that was it. The marketplace was office, office, office in the 80s, right? Somerset County, Morris County, Parsippany, that was the hub in the state of New Jersey. That's why we located our office here. And those 35, 36 plus years, obviously the trend has changed. And now we have landlords that have to try to solve these issues with large vacant blocks of empty office space. So I think this is a great alternative. Architecturally, I think it works. Engineering-wise, I think it works. And I think this would be a great addition to the township of Parsippany if you were to approve the project.
Chuck, could you just give your opinion on the signage that's proposed for the walls?
Yeah, what we did on our submission package, again, we designed it as if these buildings were going to be broken down into 2 tenants. So basically, on each side of the building, for 2 buildings, we proposed 1 tenant sign. I think we met the height and the size requirement in your ordinance. It was just, are we allowed to have those facade signs or not? So we're just showing a single tenant signage piece, not even high up. I think it's only 25 feet off the ground versus the 40 feet in height. And then we've also designed the monument sign that Mr. Chaplin spoke about, which would be a decorative precast concrete panel with another inset metal and decorative letters on that for whatever tenant, with the address of the project. And whether we put the tenants on there or not, I'll leave that to the applicant. But we've tried to, as I usually do with both my retail and my office, I like to design the freestanding signs as part and complementary to the architecture on the buildings.
So you think that, in your opinion, the signage is proportional and appropriate for the size of the building?
Yes, and we actually had it on the rendering and then we took it off, but thinking about 25 feet, the sign would be somewhere down, just above the midpoint of the building. It was barely visible through all these trees when she was showing it on the building. So I don't think it's something that's glaring. It'd be internally illuminated channel letters, so you wouldn't have a light source that was an issue. It's not being proposed at the top of the building at 43 feet, so not everybody's going to see it. But I think once you pull into the parking lot, I think it's nice, especially if we go a couple tenants in each building, I think it will help identify the areas and who those tenants are. So I don't see that as a major issue in this area, knowing there's no residential, there's no light overflow or light pollution per se on this building. And as Mr. Chaplin mentioned, we've worked with his office and we've located on our drawings all his downlights for security. So they are now placed architecturally that fit in with our scoring and our pattern and our windows. So we've worked closely with him. They're LED, they're modern, and they have a shield, and everything basically gets thrown straight down to the ground.
And just to follow up on some of the items raised, the building will not exceed 45 feet, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and any mechanical equipment that's put on the roof will not be visible from the road?
That's correct. Most likely they'll all be centered in the middle of the building. So you can see from these perspectives, your eye vision across the tops of these parapets, which will be a couple feet tall, probably on the low end, and a little taller on the high end, depending on which way we're sloping the roof. It would be very challenging. If they were visible, we would provide a screening system, self-supporting screening system that would sit on the unit. So they would definitely be screened either way, by the parapet or by a third-party screening system.
And the building will comply with all ADA requirements and fire code requirements?
Correct. Fully modern building with full ADA and fire sprinkler design that would be done separately based on the tenant use.
All right, and based on your design, because this was brought up by several board members, there would be max, which I'm glad you testified to, 3 tenants proposed in these buildings.
That's how we've set it up. And on some of the 10 projects I'm working on, I do have the flex. I have a building that's, just under 100,000 square feet, and we're proposing 16 tenants. So yes, that's where we're finding the 5,000, 6,000, has a little office and someone drives the plumbing truck in, or the mechanical, or the painter, because they can't park their vehicles on the street in town in front of their house. So we've designed those types. They're usually not as tall as this because they don't need the clear height because they're not stacking things. But that would be more in the flex building design. This is a true warehouse and distribution design for this property.
Great, thank you. All right, that concludes the direct. Mr. Dietz, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions by members of the board on
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mealy?
Sir, you haven't mentioned solar panels. I gather there will not be any?
Being a modern building.
We usually have our structural engineer design the roof structure to handle solar panels, but right now we are not currently proposing solar panels.
All right,
But
thank
the
you.
structure, he usually has between 5 and 7 pounds a foot to his structural design.
And then
to
there is
allow that.
some height.
Yeah, which wouldn't be any taller than the Cambridge-style heating units that we're proposing.
Right.
But yes, this would be a good roof if the applicant decided to run that way.
Thank you.
Put solar on.
Mr. Dietz, you have a...
Yeah, good question, yeah. So, you mentioned 2 to 3 tenants per building or just total?
Per building.
Per building. So I was just thinking, logistically, wouldn't it be better to have office space in both sides of the building instead of in one place?
Which is what we're proposing. If you looked at our floor plan,
Yeah.
we've created this box within a box indentation on both sides of the building. So if it came as one tenant, they would get to choose, well, I want my entrance on the left side or the right side. But if it went 2 tenants, we could accommodate both with basically similar box within a box. And if a third tenant came, we would just take some of those knockout panels and put some glass in a canopy and allow them to come in the middle. But right now, I've really designed the architecture for 2 tenants, a left and a right side.
Okay.
Where they could
Yeah,
use
I asked that
feature.
question because the picture I'm looking at, it shows kind of one box on one side, so.
They're on both sides.
Okay, thank you.
And I apologize, the floor plan, because the building's a little big, we had to put a match line in so you don't kind of see the whole building in a long linear line. We had to cut it and put it on 2 sheets.
All right. Mr. Math?
This may end up being a better question for the planner, but you said you're working on several warehouse projects throughout New Jersey, right?
Yes.
Are you familiar with what the parking requirements are on those? I mean,
They
I'm
vary,
curious.
and from what I'm seeing and what I'm being told and listening to our traffic engineer and our civil engineer, I believe Parsippany's is a little more stringent than what I'm seeing in some of the other municipalities. A lot of times I see 1 per 1,000 or 1 per 1,200 for a building for a straight warehouse. The couple that I'm doing now that are smaller in East Hanover, they are, again, we're not proposing that. They're life science, manufacturing. Those are the ones that usually tend to have more employees, more office space requirement, hence more parking requirement. That is not what we're proposing. That's not what the applicant is proposing. That's not how he's going out in the marketplace because he can't. And I've had 2 small warehouses in East Hanover go back to the planning board to get more parking, because when he turned the warehouse from a warehouse distribution facility into a science, manufacturing, office facility, we were about 30 parking spaces short. So we had to do some other things. But we discussed that at the beginning. That's not what the applicant is looking to do at this location. We're not looking to market to those types of tenants. So I think with the modernization and the automation of these types of straight warehouse racking distribution, the parking, I think, is even a little heavy for what we see in some of our other locations for straight warehouse.
So you said you've seen like 1 per 1,000 and 1 for every 1,200 square feet. Have you seen any other that use employee headcount?
The ones that, of the 10 I have, the applicant and the engineer, I talked to the attorney this afternoon about that, and I pulled up about 8 different plans. And I think there was only one that took the 1 per 1,000 or a couple extra for employees, if we had an employee count. But everything else is basically the 1 per square foot number that I've seen. And I'm in South Jersey, I'm in North Jersey, Central Jersey. I have 3 up in Rockland County. So I'm kind of around the greater metropolitan area with my projects that I mentioned to you.
I could be off, but I think that the parking ratio we've got on this site proposed right now is 1 for every 4,000 square feet.
I'd have to check with.
Yeah, we can confirm that, but
Yes.
it sounds correct.
All right, thank you.
Other questions by members of the board? Mr. Napolitano?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Just real quick, I'm looking at obviously the non-truck side. Are there fire exit doors on this side that I'm looking at right now where the trees are?
Yeah, and like I mentioned, if you look at my application drawings, we did not show the fire doors in the front. We normally would put a 400-foot diameter radius on the plan and put all those doors in, so we will do that before, obviously, if we get approved.
Yeah.
Even without the racking, that would give us more than enough doors, no matter what racking system they came up with.
Okay.
But we potentially did not show those, and I'm not happy with my draftsman, I missed it, that I didn't.
How many feet apart do they have to be?
You can only do a travel distance of 400 feet before you go to, so what we do is we put a radius around the building, and all the intersecting points, that's where we'll drop a door in. So there'll probably be a couple on the side, and the rest will be in the front. We already have the rear ones that'll act as egress, we just didn't put the other 3 sides in. But we'll have more than enough spots for any racking layout that comes up.
Yeah, and I think if we didn't say this, I apologize, but we agreed to comply. There were a couple comments from the fire department dated June 26, 20. We'll comply with those items.
Thanks.
All right, our planner has some questions.
All right, so potentially you're looking at offices on both ends of the building.
If it broke up into 2 tenants, if it's 1 tenant, we're giving them the option to pick left or right.
Well, the site plan right now doesn't really give them the option to pick left or right. All the parking's on one end. And the entrance.
Yes, I thought he had on the side elevation, I thought we had some. But I'm looking at my architectural submission drawing.
So on the site plan, it has all the parking shifted toward Jefferson Road for employees.
The employee parking for that building?
For both buildings, so both offices would have to be on that side, or you need additional.
Building A, right, so building A, all the parking.
Yeah, the site plan
That
shows
side.
the office space
Right.
in that area. But
So if you have the offices additionally on the Wood Hollow side, you're gonna need access to them, sidewalks, entrances, additional parking.
Okay. So I guess the answer to your question is, my mistake, I showed it that way. I think it's an easy fix. If a tenant came in and took the other side, we would just take some of the landscaping out, and we could add additional parking if needed. So I set it up as 2, the civil engineer set it up as 1, use on one side. Yeah, we could shift the parking either way.
Can those be land banked?
What's that?
You have a whole strip of landscaping along the side of the building?
Right.
Land bank those in case some questions about parking?
That would be up to the board.
Does that kind of quell some of your concerns, Mr. Meth, about that whole landscaping strip could be banked for future parking if needed?
Which on the bioretention one?
No,
No, so it'd be
No,
this
just-
area. So I'm saying,
Okay.
I've mimicked this corner on that corner, so we could either move it
It wouldn't
or
affect the drive aisle. I mean,
Right.
again, I would have to.
nothing else would be
Yeah.
changed.
I mean, we felt, I mean, just to answer the question, and I hear what Mr. Nuss is saying, we felt that leaving more green space was more beneficial. Having more, almost an acre more of green space. We were comfortable with the parking based on what Mr. Dietz described, and that this would be more of an automated conventional warehouse with 2, 3 tenants max. But if the board felt that you wanted that extra layer of protection, where if it was determined in the future that extra spaces were needed, I could talk to the client about that. I don't think that's a,
I just think from a, I mean, again, I don't know.
but we do comply with the ordinance. Based on the ordinance calc, we do comply.
No, I just don't know from a tenant perspective, are they signing 20-year leases and then, because could the building's dynamic change?
Just like, well, it would just be like any type of building, right?
No, but if you put offices on both sides and didn't have the right parking, and then there's offices on both sides that not needed, like, I'm just saying, as tenants shift, what would that look like if it's not set in stone now?
Well, and the other thing is, I think right now you're basing off estimated employees, not actual employees, in that you do not have an actual tenant.
That's
So you-
correct.
So you don't know what the head count is, you're estimating it.
We'd have to, yeah, but as you know, we'd have to, any tenant would be bound by the board's decision, right, and bound by the plans. If the board, if a tenant wanted more employees, we'd have to come back to the board, or the tenant couldn't accept the space. I mean, the owner completely understands that. But like I said, if you felt based on Mr. Lagana's recommendation that you bank additional spaces just in case the board felt it wanted that extra layer of cushion, that's fine. We just felt that the extra green space was more beneficial.
And perhaps, Mr. Chaplin, you can take the distance from the corner of each of those buildings down, and see, taking the measurement, see how many more parking spaces can actually fit along that building.
Yeah, we can get that for you. I mean,
Yeah,
it
and then
would probably be double.
if that additional, again, it would remain green space if needed, if there are, say, 4 tenants on, like the
Yeah,
architect is
and
indicating.
and based on Mr. Dietz's testimony, we're committing to no more than 3, if the board feels more comfortable with that.
Because it seems to me that there's room along the building.
There's plenty of room for more
Right,
parking.
so.
Yeah,
just-
I mean-
Again, it's green space versus parking, but the banked parking kind of gives you that flexibility that it can stay green space for now, and if needed in the future, can be built out pretty easily.
I mean, I'll only say that every overlay zone we've done in an area in need of redevelopment, when we considered warehouse space, we've gone away from the employee head count and used the square footage count. And I think the most aggressive one we had, or the lowest one, was 1 for every 2,400 square feet, correct, Christine?
I think it's in that range.
So as opposed to 1 for every 4,000 square feet, which is what this current proposal has. 1 per 1,000 is a safe number, in my experience, for warehouse of parking. I'm just putting it in context. My biggest concern is if there's not enough parking, we're gonna see cars parked in the aisles, the access aisles, and that's the last thing I wanna see.
Well, all I could, and you know this, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, is that we're going by the ordinance, right? So we're going by the ordinance and we're committed to the numbers that we're talking about. We know that we cannot exceed them. But I think the land banking, I guess to address the board's maybe concern on that issue is we could leave it green space. We're confident based on what Chuck was saying, and Mr. McDonough will address it as well, that the type of warehousing we're doing won't necessitate that parking, but we could have it there if it becomes an issue.
I like the land banking idea.
Yeah, I think, and the other thing is, I mean, you're giving us back 40,000 square feet plus or minus.
Correct.
Of new landscaped areas. Some extra landscape in front of the building, I don't think will make a hill of difference.
Okay.
And I would have to cut a couple sidewalks in there just to get my egress doors out anyway. It couldn't exactly be that way. I'd have a couple doors across that frontage.
Let me speak to the client. If we take a break, when we're done with Mr. Deacons, I could talk to the client and the team about it. I don't want to commit to something without. So would the board prefer the land banking or just making it parking? We prefer to land bank it to be.
Well, if I understand it, the land banking is, if you need it, you use it, otherwise you still will leave that green.
And it wouldn't even be just us. It would be in the board's jurisdiction. If you felt that you could designate, whether it be the engineer or the planner, felt that additional space, those spaces were necessitated, we would have to build it.
And I think that's a good idea, because if you do come back with say the applicant comes back during permitting and says, yeah, we nailed 4 clients or 4 tenants, and we're gonna be building out all 4 corners, then that's gonna change the site plan. That gives the flexibility to Mr. Canjiano to say, well, now you have to add the parking in this without having to come back to the board.
That's a fair point.
And do the parking analysis over again. So it gives a little bit of in-field
Let
flexibility.
me speak to the team, because I just don't want to, I want to make sure we.
Yeah, before we do that, I just want to make sure that you know, there was some discussion of a bus stop.
Yes. No,
and access to that bus stop from the site.
Yes.
So that
No, Gordon made that clear that was a concern. Well, I'll talk to the team about that as well.
Right, so we'll get to that. I want to make sure the board has asked their questions of this witness at this time. Any other members of the board have questions? Are there any members of the public who have questions of this witness on this testimony at this time? Hearing and seeing none, I order a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
In operation?
Yes, we're ready.
All right, if you could call the roll, please.
So for both of you, what happens after the period? After
Mr.
25
Dedeek.
Here.
Councilman DePiero.
Here.
Mr. Neely.
Here.
Mr. Matt.
Present.
Mr. Napolitano.
Here.
Mr. Shaw.
Here.
Mr. Stanziel.
Here.
Chairman Dinsmore.
Here. All right.
Okay.
Counselor.
Yeah, so our next witness, Mr. Chairman, is our traffic engineer, John Korak, from Stonefield Engineering and Design. But before we get there, the applicant is willing to do the land banking of the spaces. So we can do that, and we can get the number of more spaces that does. And we'll also agree to work on the connection to the bus stop from the site to the satisfaction of your engineer.
Okay.
I would defer to the board on that. It's kind of a difficult spot with where the bus stop is.
Sorry.
I had suggested at least getting the sidewalk out to the street. It's up to the board if they wanted to extend it further along the frontage of Jefferson Road.
Yeah, sorry, my engineer corrected me, to the right of way is what he was saying.
I don't know. I mean, it's sort of I spoke with Justin Lahr. I emailed with Justin Liza. He concurs that there would be a need for some sidewalk. He's not sure which side of the street it would be best suited on. The bus stop is on the other side of the street. So it's hard to say where's best to put the sidewalk, if at all, on the right-of-way, but I know it's something that this board likes to promote, of getting sidewalk along the right-of-way and street frontage. So I don't have a strong preference if we add it on the right-of-way or not, but I think we should at minimum get it extended to the right-of-way from the site, is what I'm trying to say.
I think we will have that discussion on the circulation plan to make sure that people have the ability to walk safely to the road at the very least, and then cross as appropriate.
Okay.
Sir.
All right, our next witness is our traffic engineer, John Korak from Stonefield. Swear him in.
Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Name and address for the record, please.
John Korak, last name spelled C-O-R-A-K. Stonefield Engineering and Design, 92 Park Avenue, Rutherford, New Jersey.
Okay. John, can you just go through your qualifications as well, educational background, licenses held, and experience testifying as a traffic engineer in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, certainly. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I hold a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the College of New Jersey. I'm an expert in the field of traffic and transportation engineering. I've prepared over 200 traffic studies for land development applications. I've testified before over 80 boards within the state, including the Parsippany Zoning Board, and pleasure to be here in front of the Planning Board today.
All right. Would the board accept him as an expert in the field of traffic engineering?
Any questions on this man's qualifications?
All right, John, you prepared a report in connection with this application?
Yes, I did.
All right, so I think that a report addresses 3 aspects of the project: trip generation, parking, and site circulation, correct?
Correct.
All right, I'll let you address those in the order that you see fit.
Sure. So starting out with preparing a traffic study, right, we review the site location, make the site visit. The site itself, as Mr. Chaplin talked about, surrounded by 3 fronting roadways, all of which are under municipal jurisdiction. We have the Wood Hollow Road frontage, the Smith Road frontage, and the Jefferson Road frontage. And as shown on the aerial exhibit here, Exhibit A2, each one presently has an access point to each of those site frontages. Smith Road and Jefferson Road, they're considered to be collector roads. They carry a little bit more traffic as they carry traffic to the arterial roads, to the highways, to the interstates that are in the immediate vicinity of the site. Wood Hollow Road is considered a local road. It carries less traffic And of course, that makes it an ideal candidate in the previous condition to be that main entrance, but in our proposed condition to have our truck movements on and off the roadway instead of on one of the two busier streets being Smith Road and Jefferson Road. As it relates to traffic generated by the site, this is a lower generator than what is there today if it were fully occupied. For the proposed warehouse use, we calculated trip generation utilizing the Institute of Transportation Engineers Trip Generation Manual. This is the industry standard for forecasting traffic for various types of land uses. Here we use the warehousing land use, which is consistent with the proposed development. And warehouse uses, and despite the larger floor area, they do not generate as much traffic as, say, an office use would of a similar floor area. In this case, what we would project during the course of a peak hour in the morning is about 53 total trips in and out combined of the site. And in the afternoon or the evening peak, 56 total trips. And so that includes both passenger vehicles and trucks. Trucks during the peak periods is a relatively low percentage of the total volume during those peak hours. Be about 6 trucks we expect in the morning, about 9 trucks during that evening peak. So around 10 to 15% of that total traffic volume likely to be truck traffic. And then during the day, when there's less traffic on the surrounding roadway network, those truck volumes do increase a little bit. But of course, we do have very easy connections, both to I-80 and 287 in all 4 directions, north, south, east, and west. The NJDOT and the ITE both look at a trip generation, peak hour trip generation of 100 trips as a threshold for measuring significant impact or the chance or the occurrence of significant impact, right? Where basically at that point you would want to start evaluating it. Here we're about half of that trip generation, and we're also substantially less than what that office building used to generate. That building, based on ITE numbers, could have generated 8 to 9 times the amount of traffic in the peak hours as the proposed warehouse building. So from a traffic perspective, old to new, this should be an improvement if you compare 2 fully operating and operational land uses on the site. Moving into, I'll go with site circulation next, right? Very common for us to split up the truck access and the passenger vehicle access. We tend to want to limit the interaction between the 2 uses. We do have the wider truck access aisle. We'll look to constrict it as we can while still accommodating those truck movements on and off the site. But each of the access points helps serve the different parking areas, helps accommodate easy on and off with respect to the site and the surrounding roadway network. And given the size of the property and the number of frontages, I think that the number of access points and the turning movements allowed is consistent with general best access management principles. We have the center court for truck circulation. There was some commentary and discussion before about the length of those loading spaces versus the length of the truck. The length of the truck, to clarify, and it is shown on the truck turning exhibit, right? Exhibit A4. The total length of a WB67 is 73.5 feet. So there's a little bit of overlap between what was testified before about the length of the trailer and the length of the cab, because the 2 have to connect. So the total length is 73.5 feet, but that trailer length is 53 feet. And it's typical for a warehouse operation. When a truck pulls into or backs into the loading dock, that cab does not remain at that trailer for very long. So in a warehouse facility, you may have several trailers sitting there while they're being loaded, unloaded, but that cab driver, that truck driver, is basically taking their next delivery and going on their way. And so a 53-foot long trailer staging in a 60-foot long loading space is very common. It's basically, this design, the 60-foot loading spaces with the 70-foot drive aisle is an industry standard for warehouses. I've seen it on a number of other projects, designed both by my firm and other firms. We've worked with other site civil engineers while Stonefield's doing the traffic. And so I think the board can feel comfortable that this is something that is tried, true, and tested, that the circulation here will work safely and efficiently for those truck maneuvers. The last piece touched on before, previous testimony about the parking. Right, we do propose 76 parking spaces, now proposing to land bank additional spaces. I just want to touch a bit on what we might expect from a parking perspective. The engineer's review letter brought up some points about the parking generation manual from ITE. I think that's a good resource as it relates to potential parking demand, and I think that land banking the spaces will cover us there. But also, the data within the ITE is from, let's say, about the past 30 years or so. And there have been certainly advances within the warehousing industry, more automation, less employee need, less parked vehicles on the site. And so as you start to look towards study sites that are more recent, you are seeing parking demand per square foot go down. And that's a little more commensurate with the 76 spaces proposed. So right now we're proposing one space per about 4,000 square feet. To me, that fits within the general current industry range between one per every 2,500, one per every 5,000. I've seen both of those numbers thrown around in different municipalities. But with the parking supply here, I feel comfortable will work for a modern warehouse facility on the site.
John, if we land bank spots the way that the board had requested, how many more spaces? I believe the site engineer said you would get 35 on each side, so for a total of 70 more spaces, is that correct?
Right, so that'd be 70 more spaces. Coincidentally, that was the number in my report before that we took away earlier, but yeah, 70 more spaces. That would bring us to 146. That would meet that ITE number, actually. But I think that'd be certainly sufficient to support the operations here.
Okay, so you believe that all the loading areas, in terms of spaces and dimensions, are designed appropriately and efficiently?
Yes, the 260s with the 70 drive aisle is basically an industry standard.
And all drive aisles throughout the site and driveways are all designed correctly?
Yes, but I think that the central truck aisle and then the general separation of the passenger areas from that is a good practice in terms of design for these warehouse uses, and I think it's designed safely and effectively.
All right, and there's proper site distances at the driveways?
Yes.
Okay, and also, I know that Mr. Chaplin indicated this, but you reviewed the site plan. We comply with the new New Jersey state law in terms of EV chargers?
Yep, we meet and exceed the number of required chargers.
And we did not take a credit for that, correct?
No, there's no credit on the in our calculations. Technically, you can get a credit of up to 10% of the requirements. But the 76 that we've been talking about didn't incorporate those credits.
Okay, and we meet the requirements for ADA spaces, for conventional ADA spaces and EV ADA?
Correct, and I think there was a comment about accessible ADA, and we'll make sure that we comply as far as covering that end of it.
Okay, that's all I have for Mr. Clark, Mr. Chairman.
Members of the board have questions of this witness on this testimony? Gordon?
I've got a couple. Anybody want to go first? First of all, I appreciate your testimony about the cabs. Is there a need for parking for cabs on this site?
It tends to be, the way that these operate, it tends to be a drop one, take another. There's not usually any sort of long-term need for cab parking, cab storage on the site itself. In the event that is, the cab has to wait, it's usually in one of the other loading dock spaces.
Okay. And on trip generation, given that you haven't identified a tenant, don't fulfillment centers or parcel hubs have much higher trip generation?
They do.
Okay. But would those still be well underneath the previous use?
Yeah, the previous office use should exceed most if not all different warehousing types of uses at this size.
Okay. And I appreciate your testimony about the parking generation manual. In the new apps, I believe it's possible to take out just newer data samples. Have you done that?
Yeah, so we've looked at the last 10 years, last 5 years, as far as the data samples. So yeah, I've filtered that down, and you're seeing a steady decrease in terms of the amount of parked vehicles that they would project for this size site.
What's the average for the last 10 years?
10 years, it would put us right about 77 vehicles
For this site?
for this size. And then last 5 years, it's 71.
So almost the same.
Almost, but you're seeing a trend downward.
Understood. All right, thank you.
Other members of the board have questions on this? Actually, I'm assuming you're happy with the idea that, I'm looking at this from the sidewalk point of view and the circulation plan, and I would imagine that given that there is a bus stop on Jefferson Road, that having some sort of sidewalk access to Jefferson Road, and then frankly, putting the offices towards that end of the building makes the most sense.
Agreed.
Now, I wouldn't want to specify exactly what you have to do, but that sounds like it would be foolish to do it any other way.
Right, the location of the offices closest to Jefferson, the fact the bus stop is there, that would make the most sense to me.
Attenuate the need for the parking spaces.
It does help.
Okay. Any members of the public have any questions on this witness and this testimony? Do you have any?
I'm good.
Okay, just making sure. Forgot.
Mine's got traffic.
Hearing and seeing none, Counselor?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next witness is our professional planner, John McDonough.
Mr. McDonough, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I
Name
do.
and address for the record, please.
Sure, hi, everyone. John McDonough, 101 Gibraltar Drive, Parsippany, New Jersey.
All right, John, do you want to go through your qualifications for the board?
Sure, I'm a licensed professional planner here in the state of New Jersey. That license is current, it's in good standing. I'm also a member of the AICP, that's our national certification, also current and good standing. And I do this every night.
All right.
Probably more. Fridays off.
Probably more than anyone else. Okay. All right.
And here every now and then.
Okay. All right.
Anybody willing to question this man's qualifications? Hearing and seeing none.
All right. So, John, just in terms of the foundational items, you visited the site and the surrounding area. You're very familiar with it?
Yes, I am.
All right. And you reviewed all the relevant sections of the zoning ordinance and the master plan?
Yes, I have.
And you've listened to all the testimony?
Yes, I have.
And reviewed all the plans and reports, both from the applicant as well as from the board's professionals?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you want to get started with just maybe going over some of the zoning criteria for the property, and then we can get into the variance proofs.
Sure, and while I talked, I did bring the board
Okay.
some visuals for context. I'll take one.
It's A6.
A6, right?
A6 for the record, it's just going to be file size 11 by 17. They're photographs of the subject property. I think there's about 5 of them in here. They're all aerial photographs, and I believe they were actually taken today, so they were as close to real time as we can.
All right. And John, this was all prepared by your office and represents existing conditions?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Five photos, you said?
There's 5 photos in the packet, yep, under A6. And as it's getting handed out, you'll see there are pictures of the site. You know now the statistics of the site, the familiar aspects of it. A single tax lot, block 736, lot number 4. It's about 23 acres, so it's one of the largest lots in the area. It's got excellent carrying capacity to accommodate a development like you see before you. It has accommodated a large building, a multi-story building, for many years, with an expansive parking lot that the applicant is going to fix by putting building masses in its place. Much more desirable from a planning standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, from an aesthetic standpoint as well, to have massing over the sprawling expanse of parking lot. You may remember this building being one of the first ones out of the gate before the 80s boom. When this building was built, we didn't have the Sheraton there. This preceded that. You didn't even have 202 out here then. You had a little road along the way. You didn't have anything going on over on the Dodge track side as well. So this was really one of the first office buildings out of the gate back in the early 80s, late 70s. You had Lanadex. We know what's happening over at Lanadex now with the transformation as well. This is sort of the other corner of the junction of 287 and 80. The important thing here is it's a transportation node. This site has excellent connectivity to the regional highway network, which makes it extremely desirable for the land use that's before the board. You put a logistics facility here, you're not looking at having truck traffic going through local roads, right onto the highway, right off the highway. And again, that's why it's a permitted use here in the SED 5 zoning district, that this site, surrounding land use context, has the capacity to accommodate the development that's before you. The key points of the photograph, in number one, again, you just get a sense looking to the east that this is a sprawling parking lot as it presently exists. In terms of context, actually, we'll flip over to the next page. You're looking at the Sheridan off to the left. Reservoir would be further beyond. You've got the new office buildings along 80 further beyond. And then, again, most of these buildings that you see in this photograph here were not there when this building was built. So the point is, it sort of has outlived its useful life and is ripe for transformation. Frame number 3 is just taking us looking to the north. You can see the Sheridan right on the other side. You've got the Reservoir and Booton beyond that. You've got Route 46, Route 80, and Route 287 all right here at the convergence of where this site is. Frame number 4 is looking to the west. Again, you see nothing but non-residential development around us. You can see the transformation happening over there at Lanadex on the other side of Route 287. And then finally, just bringing you back full circle, frame number 5, we're now looking to the south. The key point here is we've got a substantial amount of big box commercial development, office, and this big box development would fit in nicely with the context of what's around it. The relief that the applicant is seeking from your SED 5 zone district is relatively minimal. Really, 2 forms of relief here that the applicant is seeking. Number 1, to have that wall that exceeds 4 feet in height. You heard that it's just a little piece that will preserve that buffer around the perimeter of the property. And then the parking location in the front yard, which is somewhat of a practical difficulty given the fact that we do have 3 frontages here. But it's also justifiable under the flexible C balancing test, where we look at site betterment, taking what's there, putting building masses will reduce the actual parking in the front yard over that which presently exists. There was relief as well, I believe, which was more design related and addressed by the designers before me. I think related to the loading berth side and related size and related to the driveway width as well. You heard about the design rationale for why those deviations are needed. Taking all of the relief together, we're going to apply it under the flexible C balancing test, where we look at the benefits of the application as a whole. We'll counterbalance them against the potential negatives here.
John, just don't forget about the signs also.
And the signage to relate to the clear and safe identification of the site as well. As you've heard through Chuck's testimony, they're tasteful, they integrate with the overall architecture. These are going to be high-quality buildings. High-quality buildings will attract high-quality tenants. The entire package folds together very nicely. On the positive side, this project is going to deliver permitted use that responds to market demand for rapid logistics delivery to a consumer population that demands this type of land use. In a world that has gone from one that we would go out to, the world now comes to you. This land use certainly caters to that. The Office of Homeland Security now considers this to be critical infrastructure. The Office of Emergency Services as well calls it critical infrastructure, and will provide jobs, will provide services, will provide economic development, all public benefits. Project will promote efficient land use by taking a developed site and repurposing it in accordance with contemporary demand, putting it into productive use. This site is well suited for this location, again, being at that transportation hub of 287, 46, and 80 right there. Visually, functionally, environmentally, this is going to be an improvement over the property, over its current underutilization condition. Taking all of this back to the statute, we see the advancement of several purposes of zoning, especially A, G, I, and M. On the flip side, all relief can be granted here without any substantially adverse impacts to the public. to the area or to your zone plan. The site, as we said, has excellent connectivity, so, excuse me. Notwithstanding the fact that the applicant does not need parking relief, the applicant has adhered to your ordinance, but the applicant is stipulating to provide for that bank parking in the event there ever is a situation here. So I think you have that good safety mechanism. We talked about the wall height as being reasonable and not overpowering, actually sunken relative to the public realm, not standing out. And then the parking in the front yard, as I said, is a betterment over the existing long-standing condition. Sign package would fold in there under the public benefits test as well. And then the lower level relief, the design exceptions, based on the testimony of the witnesses before me, are reasonable and appropriate. With that said, it's important that the 2020 master plan talks about repurposing your economic base here, which is the office campuses and parks that are plentiful. This is right on point with that. The master plan actually does talk about reconsidering creative solutions to parking as well, and ratios that may respond to public demand or to contemporary demand. We think the applicant has struck that good balance here through this interactive process with the board. All said, based on all the testimony this evening through Zach and through Chuck and through John, we think this application has landed at a good place where the criteria are met and approval is warranted.
All right, so just a few follow-ups. So you believe that this application furthers many goals of the master plan?
It does, especially to provide for a stable rateable base in light of the problems that your own master plan talks about with respect to the office market and the reliance thereon.
Okay, how does this play into your opinion that the fact that the application complies with all the setbacks, height, and coverage requirements?
All of your light, and it's a very good point, all of your light and air controls are met. The applicant's not looking for relief relative to the height, relative to the coverage, and relative to the setbacks on all sides.
Okay, I know this is a softball question, but how does the fact that there's a large reduction in impervious coverage play into your analysis from a planning perspective?
The applicant is greening up the site, so environmentally, visually, that is going to be an improvement. Aesthetically,
And from a stormwater management perspective as well?
yes, indeed.
So does that play both, not only into the positive criteria, but also to the negative criteria about any substantial detriment to the public good?
It plays into both, yes.
Okay. So in your professional opinion, both the positive and negative criteria under the C2 test are met?
It's clear weight on the positive side here outweighing any negative impact.
Okay.
There is an element of C1 associated with the parking location in the front yard. It's a hardship having 3 frontages.
Okay. So in your professional opinion, the granting of the relief sought would substantially outweigh any detriments?
That's correct, on balance.
Great. All right, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right. You like your drone, don't you?
I do. I don't fly it. I
No.
don't touch that thing.
Okay. Any questions of this testimony at this time from our board members? No? Our planner, do you have some?
No, thank you.
Okay. Our engineer?
No.
Nobody has any questions? Goodness.
Well, I have one. So this is more or less a fully conforming site, correct?
Now that's a softball. Yeah, yes it is.
He didn't give me his John McDonough that it meets all the higher tiers of zoning.
No, I just laid on it.
Okay. All right, softball question.
I feel light and air controls. I've never heard that one. I like it.
Well, I used to sit on the Board of Adjustment with a Colonel David Stivers.
Yes, if you would have asked what time of day was the aerial taken?
The Colonel and Mr. McDonough did not usually see eye to eye.
We danced a few times.
Yeah. So, are there any members of the public who have any questions on this witness at this time? Hearing and seeing none? Counselor, you...
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that concludes our direct, I know maybe you have to open up to the public for comment if there are any, but then I can do a brief summation before we
All
conclude.
right. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak in opposition to this case or this application at this time? Hearing and seeing none. In favor of this application at this time? Hearing and seeing none.
Okay. So just very briefly, I think Mr. McDonough's testimony kind of wrapped this all up. It's really a nearly conforming application with some minor relief. The applicant really went out of its way to adhere to the zoning regulations in the SED 5 zone. As was testified to, we're and I don't get to say this that often either, we're taking this site and we're making it, we're increasing the amount of green space substantially and also preserving a lot of the landscaping on site. So I think that's a real positive here. We're improving the site, as we talked about throughout the application, from both a stormwater perspective, a lighting perspective, an aesthetic perspective, all things that your zoning ordinance and master plan require and recommend. I do think, though, as part of site plan review with any board, the goal is to also impose reasonable conditions based on the board's review, and I think we've done that here. And I've listed some of the conditions that I thought, have improved an application that we already thought was a positive for the township. One is, the first one was the reduction of the drive aisle width, if the board engineer felt that was appropriate. The second was making sure that the roof was solar ready in the event that the applicant chose to go that way. Limiting the amount of tenants in each building to 3, so you could have 3 in each tenant. To talk about some of the items that were stated about having multiple tenants. The next was land banking those spaces, so getting an additional 70 spaces on site in the event that it was necessary. And then finally, working with the board's professionals on the sidewalk to the right-of-way that would help workers or visitors to the site from the bus stop be able to properly get to the office space or to the property. So I think with all those conditions that we've talked about and have imposed, I would respectfully request that the board grant the application with those conditions and with all the stipulations that we've made. Oh, and also we stipulated to all the board professional letters as well. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Those are the conditions we were...
I have a couple more.
Go ahead.
Widen the easterly road to 26 feet for fire access. That would take us 24 on your plans.
Okay, if that was...
That was a comment made by the engineer.
Yep, okay.
So as revised plans. Relocate the easements for the sanitary.
Yeah, that was also in the letters, but yes, that's correct. Yep.
Fire letter and the hydrant, that's covered by that.
Yep.
Approval from outside agencies, that's covered. Limit tenants, right in driveway. Your plans updated to reduce the chain link fence to 4 feet. That eliminated one of the variances.
Correct.
Consult with the water department for the looping.
Yep.
Revise the plans, the architectural plans to include the fire doors every 400 feet. Land bank, you mentioned, add sidewalk, you mentioned. Those are all the conditions, Mr. Chairman.
All right, now I'm going to say something I should have said before. This closes the evidentiary portion of tonight's hearing. Do I have a desire on the part of the board to have some comments, or do we want to go right to moving a resolution or moving the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion if you wish.
Mr. Neely.
A motion to approve application 23:519, WH Holdings, 5 Wood Hollow Road, lot 736, lot 4, preliminary and final major site plan to construct two warehouses with the conditions already specified by the attorney and by the testimony.
Second, Dadich.
Could you call the roll, please, Nora?
Didich?
Yes.
DePiero?
Yes.
Neely?
Yes.
Neff?
Yes.
Napolitano?
Yes.
Shaw?
Yes.
Stanziel?
Yes.
Dinsmore?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Is there anybody that has anything else that needs to come before the board tonight? I hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So ordered. You.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving indeed.
So can I believe?
December.
That's all right.
Get outside.